Ethan Cole and Declan Murphy collided in a battle of greed, betrayal, and survival that would shake Liverpool's underworld to its core. One was a daring American smuggler with secrets worth millions. The other, the city's most feared Mafia kingpin, ruthless and unyielding. When a shipment of gold vanished into the night, alliances shattered, loyalties were tested, and a deadly game began. A game where only one side could walk away alive. Please subscribe for daily new update of gang crime story and watch till end. Ethan Cole stepped off the plane at Liverpool John Lennon Airport with a calm confidence that disguised his true intentions. To anyone watching, he looked like a wealthy entrepreneur, tailored suit, polished shoes, and an American charm that made him instantly likable. But Ethan wasn't here for business in the traditional sense. He was here to build a bridge between two criminal empires, one that stretched from the streets of New Jersey to the docks of Liverpool. His crew followed closely behind. Miles Rivera, Logan Price, Carter Briggs, and Leon Torres, men loyal to Ethan not because of friendship, but because he made them rich. Together, they called themselves the American Crew, a group known for precision, secrecy, and an ability to make impossible deals look effortless. Liverpool was the perfect location. Its docks were a maze of containers, warehouses, and shadows, the kind of place where things could disappear without a trace. Ethan's plan was to use this chaos to his advantage. He had set up an import-export company as a front, claiming to deal in luxury cars and high-end vehicle parts. But inside those containers were weapons, narcotics, and counterfeit cash. To make this work, he needed local muscle, and that's where Declan Murphy came in. Declan was a name that sent shivers through the underworld. He ran the Blackport Syndicate, Liverpool's most feared criminal network. He had the city's docks under his control, police contacts on his payroll, and a history of making his enemies vanish. Ethan approached Declan through intermediaries, offering a deal that sounded too good to refuse in exchange for access to the docks and safe passage. The Americans would give Declan a cut of every shipment that passed through. Declan accepted, intrigued by the ambition of these foreign partners. The first few meetings went smoothly. Both sides shared whiskey, shook hands, and smiled. But under those smiles was silent calculation. Ethan was already planning how to outsmart Declan, and Declan was already thinking how to control Ethan. Weeks passed, and business flourished. The shipments began moving quietly, hidden in plain sight among legitimate cargo. Money poured in faster than either side expected. Ethan felt invincible. He even started dreaming of expanding into France and Spain. But greed was a dangerous thing, and he couldn't resist the temptation of one last secret operation, a shipment not even Declan knew about. This wasn't drugs or guns. This was gold, stolen from a vault in New York, smuggled out under false manifests. The gold was worth millions, enough to fund a new empire far away from Liverpool. Ethan's plan was simple. Complete this one last job, vanish with his crew, and leave the British Mafia behind. What Ethan didn't know was that Declan had already begun watching him. Rumors had spread through the docks, whispers of the Americans hiding something big. For now, Declan stayed quiet, letting Ethan believe everything was under control. But in Liverpool, secrets never stayed buried long, and the deal that had begun with promises of wealth was already starting to rot beneath the surface. The nights in Liverpool were cold and damp, but the docks burned with quiet activity. Containers were stacked like giant metal blocks. Cranes moved silently in the fog, and the occasional roar of a ship's engine echoed across the water. Ethan Cole and his crew had adapted quickly, learning the rhythm of the city and blending in with the workers. To outsiders, they were just another team of businessmen moving goods. But behind the steel doors of the warehouses, they orchestrated their secret operations with meticulous precision. Each container was logged, inspected, and secured before leaving for its next destination. Money flowed freely, and the Americans began to feel untouchable, convinced that their careful planning had kept them one step ahead of Declan Murphy and his men. Then came the shipment that changed everything. It was unmarked, bearing only a black seal, and Ethan knew immediately that it was different. Inside were gold bars, stacks of them, worth more than anything they had ever moved. His heart raced at the thought of the fortune this shipment represented, but along with excitement came fear. Declan had never been told about this cargo, and Ethan knew that hiding it was a risk. He rationalized it as a necessary move. The syndicate had their share of the profits, but the Americans deserved a little more for the danger they were taking. Declan's instincts, however, were sharper than Ethan realized. He had grown suspicious over the past weeks, noticing small inconsistencies in the shipments, unexplained routes, and subtle changes in the American crew's behavior. He tasked Ryan Doyle, his most trusted enforcer, with keeping an eye on Ethan. Ryan was a man who rarely missed anything, a shadow in the night who knew the docks better than anyone else. He followed the Americans discreetly, noting their meetings, their warehouses, and even the delivery trucks they used. One night, Ryan trailed Ethan to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city. From a distance, he observed Ethan and Logan moving the black-sealed containers with an efficiency that suggested this was no ordinary shipment. Ryan's suspicions were confirmed. Ethan was planning something behind Declan's back, something that could undermine the entire syndicate. Instead of acting immediately, Declan remained calm, letting the Americans proceed while he devised a strategy that would turn the tables in his favor. Meanwhile, within the American crew, tensions began to surface. Miles Rivera, who had always been cautious, noticed that Ethan was more secretive than usual. He questioned the need for unmarked containers and late-night operations, but Ethan brushed off his concerns, insisting that this was the final step toward their freedom and fortune. Logan Price, however, felt uneasy. He had always trusted Ethan implicitly, but the magnitude of this shipment, the sheer amount of gold, made him reconsider. In his gut, he knew something was brewing, but he didn't yet understand how dangerous it would become. The shipment was set to move the following Friday night. Ethan had planned it down to the minute, confident that no one would interfere. But Declan had already laid the groundwork for his counterstrike. He would not let the Americans walk away with the gold, and he had no intention of letting Betrayal go unpunished. As the night of the shipment approached, the calm confidence of Ethan Cole would soon collide with the calculated wrath of Liverpool, his most feared criminal, setting the stage for a confrontation that none of them would forget. Ethan Cole felt the pressure mounting as the night of the final shipment approached. The American crew moved like clockwork, checking and rechecking their cargo, double-locking containers, and ensuring their routes were flawless. Ethan's confidence remained unshaken on the surface, but deep down, a sense of unease gnawed at him. He noticed shadows lingering too long near the docks, unfamiliar faces watching their movements, and subtle changes in the behavior of Declan Murphy's men. For someone who had built a career on reading people, these signs were impossible to ignore. Miles Rivera, Ethan's second-in-command, was the first to vocalize his concerns. He had always been cautious, noticing small inconsistencies in the crew's environment and predicting potential threats. Miles warned Ethan that someone was following them, that the docks weren't as quiet as they seemed, and that Declan's patience had likely run thin. Ethan brushed off the warnings, relying on his meticulous planning and the crew's experience to get them through. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that something critical was being overlooked. Ryan Doyle, Declan's enforcer, had been quietly gathering intelligence for weeks. Through a combination of bribery and surveillance, he learned of the shipment's exact timing, the route, and even the location where the Americans planned to hide the gold temporarily before moving it out of the city. Ryan had convinced one of Ethan's drivers to cooperate, promising a cut of the profits in exchange for details. Every piece of information Ryan collected was relayed back to Declan, who was already calculating the perfect way to turn Ethan's overconfidence against him. Friday night arrived, and the American crew set their plan in motion. The truck carrying the unmarked containers rolled out of the warehouse under the cover of darkness, headlights cutting through the foggy docks. Ethan felt a surge of triumph, believing that this operation would secure their escape and their fortune. Logan Price, however, remained uneasy. He had sensed that the syndicate was aware of something, but didn't yet understand how much they had uncovered. Carter Briggs and Leon Torres followed orders blindly, trusting Ethan completely. As the truck moved toward the designated drop-off point, Declan's plan came to life. Instead of a traditional interception, he staged a fake police raid with a few trusted syndicate members posing as officers. The moment the truck stopped, armed men surrounded it, and Ethan realized immediately that this was no ordinary stop. He ordered his crew to fight, but the ambush was perfectly executed. The gold was seized before they could react, and in the chaos, Logan Price was taken by Declan's men. Ethan tried to pursue him, but the syndicate had blocked all escape routes, leaving him trapped in a nightmare of his own making. As the dust settled, Ethan understood the full extent of the betrayal he had underestimated. Declan hadn't called the real police. This was an intricate trap designed to humiliate, intimidate, and strip the Americans of everything they had built in Liverpool. The gold, the leverage, and one of their own had been taken. In that instant, Ethan realized that their plan to vanish unnoticed had collapsed entirely. Declan had played the long game, and now the American crew was at the mercy of Liverpool's darkest mafia. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test loyalty, courage, and the limits of human greed, as the crew faced consequences far beyond what they could have imagined. Logan Price had been taken to a hidden warehouse deep in the industrial district of Liverpool. The building was cold and dimly lit, the smell of damp concrete and rust filling the air. Declan Murphy's men had ensured that Logan couldn't communicate with anyone outside. He was beaten enough to feel the pain, but not broken completely, enough to force cooperation without leaving marks that would draw attention. Ryan Doyle, ever methodical, sat across from him, watching silently, waiting for the man to reveal the secrets that could destroy Ethan Cole's entire operation. Logan knew he was the key, the bargaining chip Declan needed to control the Americans. Every word he spoke could change the outcome of the entire deal. Back at the docks, Ethan and Miles were in a panic. The seizure of the gold and Logan's disappearance left them reeling. The American crew had never faced a situation like this, where every move they made seemed to be anticipated and countered. Ethan tried to gather information, sending Carter and Leon to scout for leads, but Declan's influence ran deep. Contacts who had once been helpful suddenly vanished, safe houses were compromised, and every route out of the city felt blocked. The syndicate's grip on Liverpool was tighter than Ethan had ever imagined. Inside the warehouse, Logan finally broke under pressure. He confessed everything: the location of the hidden gold, the plan to move it out of Liverpool, and even the methods the Americans had used to avoid detection. Declan listened carefully, committing each detail to memory. He didn't need to act immediately. The confession was enough to shift the balance of power entirely. With this knowledge, he could dismantle Ethan's operation without risking unnecessary confrontation. He had all the leverage he needed. Declan's strategy was subtle yet devastating. Instead of attacking immediately, he began spreading rumors throughout Liverpool's criminal world, painting Ethan as a traitor who had attempted to deceive the syndicate. Word traveled fast, and soon no one in the city was willing to work with the Americans. Every ally turned into an adversary, every potential deal evaporated, and Ethan found himself isolated. Miles tried to keep morale up, but even he could see that the situation was spiraling out of control. The crew realized that they weren't just facing a powerful enemy. They were facing a network that controlled the entire underworld of the city. Ethan knew he had to act, but the options were dwindling. Running was no longer possible, and confronting Declan without leverage was suicidal. Each plan he devised seemed doomed before it could even begin. As he watched Liverpool's streets, he understood that Declan had anticipated every move, calculated every possibility, and ensured that the Americans were trapped. The docks, which had once been their lifeline, now felt like a cage. The tension reached a breaking point when Ethan realized that Logan's betrayal, or rather, his coerced confession, had stripped them of not just their gold, but also their identity and influence in Liverpool. Every shipment, every contact, every safe house was compromised. Ethan and Miles were forced into hiding, knowing that any visible action could trigger Declan's wrath. The American crew, once confident and unstoppable, had become prey. The balance of power had shifted entirely, and Ethan faced a grim reality. Surviving Declan Murphy would require more than cunning. It would require a willingness to risk everything, including their lives, in a city that no longer offered mercy. Ethan Cole knew there was only one way left to regain control: a direct confrontation with Declan Murphy. Every plan he had made to escape with the gold had failed, and every ally in Liverpool had turned against him. The city, which had once felt like a playground of opportunity, now felt like a labyrinth of danger. Ethan arranged a secret meeting at an abandoned shipyard on the outskirts of Liverpool, a place stripped of witnesses and hidden from the city's eyes. He arrived with Miles Rivera, carrying nothing but a duffel bag filled with cash, a token of goodwill, an attempt at negotiation. This was supposed to be a peace offering, a way to salvage something from the chaos that had engulfed them. Declan arrived punctually, flanked by Ryan Doyle and a few trusted men. The air was thick with tension, the smell of rust and salt mixing with the metallic scent of anticipation. Declan didn't greet Ethan with warmth or civility. Instead, his presence alone radiated authority and menace. Every step he took echoed in the empty yard, a reminder that he controlled the space, the moment, and perhaps even the fate of the Americans standing before him. Ethan tried to project confidence, but inside, he knew that this meeting was a dangerous gamble. One wrong move, one misstep, and everything, their lives, their freedom, and their remaining leverage, could vanish in an instant. Declan's strategy was simple. He would reclaim control and assert dominance, making sure that Ethan and his crew learned a lesson they would never forget. But Ethan, desperate and cornered, had his own plans. Miles Rivera had secretly smuggled a small weapon, the kind that could turn the tide in a moment of chaos. The duffel bag of cash was only a distraction, a lure to get Declan close enough to underestimate the Americans' resolve. Ethan's mind raced, calculating every possible outcome. The tension between the two sides was palpable, a silent standoff that could erupt at any second. Then it happened. Miles acted first, pulling the weapon and firing at Ryan Doyle. The sudden violence shattered the fragile balance, triggering chaos in the abandoned yard. Declan's men responded instantly, pulling their own firearms and returning fire. Shots rang out, echoing across the water, and the Americans and syndicate men scrambled for cover. In the chaos, one of the containers nearby, filled with gasoline from previous shipments, was struck by stray fire. Flames erupted instantly, engulfing the yard in smoke and fire. The explosion forced both sides to retreat, and when the smoke cleared, the scene was one of devastation. Bodies lay scattered, the duffel bag of cash was lost in the chaos, and the Americans had suffered critical losses. Ryan Doyle and Miles Rivera were dead, leaving Ethan alone in the inferno. Yet in the confusion, he managed to disappear, slipping away from the scene while Declan surveyed the wreckage. Ethan had survived, but the confrontation had cost him nearly everything he had brought to Liverpool. Declan, standing amidst the flames and the destruction, understood the lesson he had taught. Trust was fleeting, power was everything, and betrayal had consequences. The abandoned shipyard, once a place of negotiation, became a symbol of shattered alliances and unfulfilled ambitions. Ethan's escape was a reminder that in the world of crime, survival often depended on speed, cunning, and luck. Declan had won the immediate battle, but the war was far from over. The city whispered about the night of the shootout and the explosion, spreading fear and respect for the Blackport Syndicate. For Ethan Cole, the events of that night would mark a turning point, a beginning of a new phase where every decision would carry the weight of life and death, and every shadow could conceal either salvation or doom. Weeks passed after the chaos at the abandoned shipyard, and Liverpool slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though the docks now carried a heavier sense of caution. Declan Murphy had rebuilt his operations quickly, using the aftermath of the shootout and explosion to tighten his grip over the city's underworld. The story of Ethan Cole and the American crew became whispered legend among criminals, a cautionary tale of ambition, betrayal, and survival. Declan had reclaimed the gold, eliminated threats, and reinforced his dominance, sending a clear message. Crossing the Blackport Syndicate came at the highest cost. Meanwhile, Ethan's fate remained a mystery. No one in Liverpool had seen him since that night, and no body had been found in the wreckage of the shipyard. Rumors began to circulate. Some said he had died in the explosion, a casualty of his own recklessness. Others whispered that he had survived and vanished, using the chaos as cover to disappear with a small fortune he had secretly secured before the confrontation. Stories spread through both American and British criminal networks, each more elaborate than the last, turning Ethan Cole into a ghost figure, a man who might still be alive, planning his next move from the shadows. Far from Liverpool, reports surfaced of suspicious activity along the coast of France. Fishermen claimed to have seen a luxury yacht anchored off the cliffs, and authorities later discovered evidence suggesting it had been used by someone skilled at avoiding law enforcement. Some believed it belonged to Ethan Cole, though nothing was confirmed. His disappearance had turned him into a legend among smugglers and gangsters alike, a man who had dared to challenge one of Britain's most dangerous mafias and had somehow survived. Declan Murphy, despite his victories, remained vigilant. He knew that Ethan's intelligence, cunning, and resourcefulness could not be underestimated. Even if the American was thousands of miles away, Declan assumed he was planning a return, perhaps to reclaim his fortune, exact revenge, or establish a new operation somewhere far from Liverpool's watchful eyes. The Blackport Syndicate adapted, increasing security at key docks, tightening surveillance, and ensuring that no outsider could ever approach the city unnoticed. Declan had won this battle, but he understood that in the world of organized crime, victories were temporary, and the ghosts of past enemies often returned in unexpected ways. In New York and New Jersey, Ethan's name resurfaced occasionally in underground circles. Some reported sightings, others claimed he was running a new smuggling route through South America. Whether it was truly him or someone using his identity to create fear, the effect was the same. His legend continued to grow. Criminals respected and feared the story of the man who had survived Liverpool, outwitted a notorious mafia, and disappeared without a trace. Back in Liverpool, the docks remained haunted by memories of the American crew's failed deal. Workers spoke in hushed tones about the explosion, the fire, and the confrontation that had shaken the underworld. Declan's dominance was unquestioned, yet even he could not erase the memory of the Americans' audacity. The tale of betrayal, fire, and survival became part of the city's criminal lore, a reminder that in this world, trust was fleeting, power was absolute, and legends were born from danger. Ethan Cole's story ended not with a body or a capture, but with a shadow, a presence felt across oceans, a warning that some deals, once made, leave a mark that cannot be erased. And as the fog rolled over Liverpool's docks on quiet nights, those who worked in the shadows whispered his name, wondering if the American who had dared to challenge the city's darkest mafia was still out there waiting for the perfect moment to return.